Majority Report with Sam Seder.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Monday, August 26th, 2024. My name is Emma Vigeland, in for Sam Seder, and this is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Andrew R. Chow, author of Cryptomania, Hype, Hope, and the Fall of FTX's billion-dollar Fintech empire. Also on the program today, Israel and Hezbollah exchanged heavy fire yesterday. The IDF struck first, after Iran refused to escalate when Israel assassinated Hania in Iran's capital. Ceasefire talks collapsed again after Israel demanded the right to have the IDF on the Gaza-Egypt border. Meanwhile, Israel kills dozens more sheltering Gazans over the weekend. UNICEF arrives with polio vaccines, but with few means to distribute them. Russian drones kill at least 5 people in Ukraine, as Ukraine captures hundreds of Russian soldiers in Kursk. Trump is whining again, threatening to back out of the ABC debate over microphone rules. He wants the muted microphone like the one with Biden, which we said at the time would help him.
That worked well.
Trump is in Arlington today, commemorating the soldiers who died in the Afghanistan withdrawal 3 years ago. He seems to be running towards this as a campaign strategy, trying to tie Harris to this. I have my thoughts on that. We'll get to that in a bit. An Arizona judge will hear oral arguments today in the election subversion case against Trump's allies. RFK Jr.'s Trump endorsement has been met with condemnation by the rest of his family as he thirsts for a cabinet position. Some Democrats are quietly assuring food distributors not to worry too much about Harris's price gouging ideas. 16 Republican states challenge Biden's initiative to give undocumented spouses a path to citizenship. A Reagan-appointed judge rules that Breonna Taylor's boyfriend caused her death by cop shooting even after they falsified a warrant, and he wasn't the guy they were looking for. And lastly, Uber has been fined a record $324 million? Do I have that written down correctly? I think it's million. Yes, I guess it's a Dutch record in the Netherlands for giving driver data to the United States without permission. For all this talk about TikTok and governments having access to private data, I just feel like maybe we should shine a light on some of this hypocrisy here. All this and more on today's Majority Report. Welcome to the show, everybody. It is Fun Day Monday. Monday Fun Day. Hello, Bradley. Hello, Matt.
Hello, Emma.
Hello. Sam is out this week, so it'll just be myself and the crew.
I'm realizing we missed a bit possibility because people might also be aware, given the lack of clips about him. Dave Rubin is also on vacation at this time of year. This is the time of his unplugging, and he only has broken it once to come back for a Republican convention, I think, in 2020. Because he's just an independent sort of guy. But we should have had Sam record a unplug thing, just verbatim what Dave Rubin says. Like, I'll see you guys, and I'm not gonna have my phone, and Ben Shapiro's gonna catch me up when I come back. But yeah.
Yeah, that would have been good. He does seem to take a very long summer vacation
whole
every year.
month.
Remember when he tried to play off his social media break as like some sort of stand against censorship, but he was really just on vacation in the summer?
Right. Yeah. No. Now it's like this is so he can come back, ready for more ideas.
Right, ideas. They'll just be there, festering. So on Friday, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. suspended his independent presidential campaign. I mean, he started his run as a Democrat, even after being photographed conspicuously with Roger Stone, who is the kind of guy, and I think I said this at the time, like, this smells wrong. Like, this smells like one of Stone's typical rat F situations. And I feel like we're at this point where eventually, hopefully, we get some reporting on this, but that feels very likely because he has now dropped out RFK Jr. and endorsed Donald Trump. They appeared together at a campaign event on Friday in Arizona. Now, RFK says he'll suspend his campaign, but he's removing or working to remove his name from only the battleground state ballots because I don't know if you can tell, but this guy, despite being completely insane, also has an enormous ego. So he still wants to run up the numbers in other states, but in terms of the battleground states, he wants to be able to give Trump an easier path. Here he is speaking in Arizona, announcing that he's going to be throwing his support behind Trump.
Months ago, I promised the American people that I would withdraw from the race if I became a spoiler. A spoiler is someone who will alter the outcome of the election but has no chance of winning.
Thank you.
In my heart, I no longer believe that I have a realistic path to electoral victory in the face of this relentless, systematic censorship and media control. So I cannot in good conscience ask my staff and volunteers to keep working their long hours or ask my donors to keep giving when I cannot honestly tell them that I have a real path to the White House. Furthermore, our polling consistently showed that by staying on the ballot in the battleground states, I would likely hand the election over to the Democrats with whom I disagree on the most existential issues: censorship, war, and chronic disease. Oh, I want everyone to know that I am not terminating my campaign. I am simply suspending it and not ending it.
Great. Thank you.
My name will remain on the ballot in most states. If you live in a blue state, you can vote for me without harming or helping President Trump or Vice President Harris. In red states, the same will apply. I encourage you to vote for me. And if enough of you do vote for me, and neither of the major party candidates win 270 votes, which is quite possible, in fact,
straightforward message.
Today our polling shows them tying at 269 to 269. And I could conceivably still end up in the White House in a contingent election. But in about 10 battleground states where my presence would be a spoiler, I'm going to remove my name. And I've already started that process and urge voters not to vote for me.
Okay.
It's with a sense.
So he's going to try to do that, right?
Bit convoluted.
Yeah, I don't think that was
deliver it so well.
We're at 269. It's the premise of the movie with Kevin Costner, swing vote.
Yeah, we're gonna do a swing vote situation. Kevin Costner I'm in the Kevin Costner.
You know what's
role.
funny is like I believe him that he doesn't want to like throw the election to the Democrats. You know what he could have done, like to make sure the Republicans won, is just ran as a normal Democrat using the Kennedy name, but immediately ran to the right as this insane anti-vax candidate. That's I'm so anti-war that I love the Republicans. Oh, and by the way, I support Israel more than Trump and Biden.
I mean, Trump is now running as, we'll get to this later, but he just put out an ad this morning, the most just fear-mongering, pro-war on terror, Iran is the greatest threat ever, and the Democrats are leading Iran to being the superpower, with bombs and explosions in his advertisement that he put on Twitter. He's back on Twitter now. Like, how is he? You have the same opinions of him as him on war, I guess, RFK Jr., which means unfettered support for Israel as it commits a genocide, but also no support for Ukraine because this is more about letting strong men do what they want in the case of Putin and Netanyahu, not about some sort of principle. In fact, it's the opposite of that. But, you know, the Kennedy family is pretty disgusted to have their name be associated with the Trump campaign because, I mean, say what you want about the Kennedys, but they have been consistently Democrats. Like, that's a part of the whole brand for the most part. I mean, you had Maria Shriver was married to Arnold Schwarzenegger, right? And he was a Republican candidate, but he's a lib Republican. A lib Republican in California. So they were okay with those kinds of politics. But the RFK also used his father's, RFK Jr., in a Super Bowl ad that caused a stir with the family, basically just used the exact same ad that his father had used in his campaign, some of the other eerie similarities with 1968, and just slapped the junior on top of it and hoped to create some nostalgia for people so that they might vote for him.
And it didn't work, by the way.
Why he was an independent candidate when he left the Democratic primary, became an independent, right? A lot of the data showed that he might have been hurting Biden more than Trump during that time period when he was an independent after, once the general election rolled around, because he was at the point where Biden was dropping out. A lot of the polls had him at around 10%. Then when Harris got into the race, RFK was down to 4% almost immediately. So it showed, I guess, that people the double hater dynamic was benefiting him a lot. And Harris doesn't have that same baggage. So,
which is not to say the Kennedy name was benefiting him. It's wild how it's wild how little mileage he got out of the greatest name in probably the last century of politics.
Because I think people hear that guy and they go, "Oh, he's insane. He's the guy who had whale juice."
And no one cares about the Kennedys
spilling
anymore.
Onto. I mean, every time this is his daughter was quoted. This is being unearthed because I guess she's dating Ben Affleck now, but. That he apparently, when he was in Hyannis, which is in Massachusetts, when she was 6, her dad chopped off the head of a whale that washed up on Squaw Island in Hyannisport. Due to RFK Jr.'s love of studying animal skulls and skeletons, they then strapped the dead whale's head to the car and spent 5 hours driving it to their home. Every time we accelerated on the highway, whale juice would pour into the windows of the car. And it was the rankest thing on the planet, Kennedy said. We all had plastic bags over our heads with mouth holes cut out, and people on the highway were giving us the finger. But that was just normal day-to-day stuff for us. So, again, if you're trying to distance yourself from a label of weird,
yeah, I mean,
does this guy's endorsement help?
No, definitely not. I mean, to be honest with this and like the roadkill thing in Central Park, less troubling to me than the measles outbreak in American Samoa that his free speech activism on vaccines created. But
right,
yeah.
I was just fascinated with whale anatomy.
Here is his sister talking with Jen Psaki, and basically the entire family, also most of the other siblings, put out a letter, I think, distancing themselves from this.
You know, I think this is really the stakes this November couldn't be higher, which is exactly why my whole family will be fighting so hard to reelect Kamala Harris and Coach Waltz, who've been champions for the values that my family has fought for years. Donald Trump is the polar opposite. He's a threat to most basic freedoms that are core to who we are as Americans, the right for women to control our bodies, the right to live in communities safe from gun violence, to love who you love. And I think if my dad were alive today, the real Robert Kennedy would have detested almost everything Donald Trump represents. His lying, his selfishness, his rage, his cynicism, hatred, racism, fascist sympathies, deliberate misinformation about vaccines, criminal felony convictions. Daddy was the Attorney General of the United States. His rape of E. Jean Carroll, his contempt for the poor and suffering, for ethics, democracy, healing, his cruel sneering at human rights for suffering people in America and around the world. And these are the causes that was loved so passionately by the real Robert Kennedy. So I'm outraged and disgusted by my brother's gaudy and obscene embrace of Donald Trump. And I completely disavow and separate and dissociate myself from Robert Kennedy Jr. in this flagrant and inexplicable effort to desecrate and trample and set fire to my father's memory.
I mean, look, I can't imagine what that's like, especially because, RFK, the original RFK, as Attorney General had his issues, but he became in 1968 a candidate that was much more connected to, the civil rights movement, to labor unions, and really, I think, was exciting during that time period and an avatar for what modern liberalism meant, I guess, in 20th century America.
And then he took a lot of the anti-war movement too, which originally I think Eugene McCarthy brought onto the scene. But yeah, he capitalized on it and was the sort of main champion of it that led LBJ to drop out of the race. And
the problem for RFK here is that he says he's going to withdraw from the swing states, but it seems like at least in 2 of the 3 where he was on the ballot, Michigan, Nevada, and North Carolina, he's going to be unable to do so. Michigan says it's too late for Kennedy to withdraw. The deadline has passed, and in Nevada as well. And then in Pennsylvania, he just filed. We'll see what the status of that is. But this is both incredibly cynical because he wants some sort of cabinet position, and he's run out of money. It's a desecration of the Kennedy legacy, according to his siblings. And it's also just poorly executed because he's not going to be able to withdraw from at least 2 of those most important states where Trump is really panicking, I think, right now. So that's that.
Be hilarious if he caused, if those psychos caused Trump the election. It's caused some very funny infighting among some of the worst people going right now.
I would love it. I would love nothing more. All right, folks, quick break. And when we come back, we'll be talking with Andrew Chow, author of Cryptomania, Hype, Hope, and the Fall of FTX's billion-dollar fintech empire. We are back, and we are joined now by Andrew Chow, Time Magazine technology correspondent, author of Cryptomania, Hype, Hope, and the Fall of FTX's billion-dollar fintech empire. Andrew, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Thank you, Emma. It's great to be here.
So what I love about your book is that you really do kind of lift a veil off of a lot of the effective altruism tactics of a guy like Sam Bankman-Fried and some of the almost digital colonialist ambitions of this industry in particular. But I guess we should just start from the beginning about what cryptocurrency, the blockchain, NFTs are. If you don't mind explaining that to our audience and how it started as an industry.
There's a lot of people who just view crypto as a complete scam. When they hear the word, it's like a 1-to-1. Crypto is a scam. There are actually a lot of sort of idealist underpinnings behind all of this. Not to say that they've come to fruition, but that there was at least some thought that went into the creation of this technology. It was formed in the ashes of the 2008 financial crisis, when there was sort of a crisis in confidence of all of the institutions that ruled our world. I mean, the banks, the government, the internet, all of these, hyper billionaires who were seemingly colluding to benefit themselves, to bail each other out. So Bitcoin is created at this time as sort of a potential alternative financial rail so that anybody could transact with anybody across the world, that you wouldn't need to go through middlemen, predatory middlemen like American Express or PayPal, that, a Federal Reserve wouldn't control that money supply. And so, that was the sort of initial goal, that you could use decentralized technology to build a fair financial system. The idea was championed both by libertarians who just wanted the government out of their money, but also some leftists, including in the Occupy movement, who thought that, a decentralized money could be fair, potentially. Obviously, things have shook out a little differently. And I think where Bitcoin is pretty different, potentially, from what its founders had imagined.
Did the founders also have kind of unregulated or perhaps illegal markets in mind at the beginning? I mean, how much of this was also using these kinds of transactions to buy drugs or things on the dark web that may be outside of regulations, etc.?
Yes. So it's important to know that the Bitcoin was created by this person named Satoshi Nakamoto. We have no idea who they are, and they've since vanished. So we can't really go back to Satoshi and ask him or her, what they were thinking. I think, they liked the idea of a money system outside of governmental overreach. Whether, specifically condoning illegal activity, who knows? But it's definitely true that in the year, just a couple years after Bitcoin's creation, that becomes illegal financial activity becomes, it's sort of like, it supercharges Bitcoin because, especially on the Silk Road, criminals are using Bitcoin to pay for drugs, prostitutes, weapons, everything imaginable. It goes back to this idea that Bitcoin they think that Bitcoin is anonymous, that they can transact across the globe anonymously, and that they're not going to be able to be traced. Now, the funny thing is that this idea has basically since been debunked because the blockchain it's a ledger of financial history.
It's
for
literally
everybody
in
to see.
The first definition of what the blockchain is that there's always a record of the transaction, which is integral to the central premise of the tech here, right?
Completely. So it's really funny. And eventually governments catch up, particularly the IRS. And there's a great book called Tracers in the Dark by Andy Greenberg, which is basically about the US government realizing actually we can trace this stuff even way better than cash. And, so if money if crypto is going across the blockchain and stays within the blockchain, you can't really trace it. But the minute that it gets cashed out to a bank account anywhere in the world, you can go get the subpoena or whatever, and you can find whoever cashed it out. So it actually becomes a really effective way for the government to trace criminals. Not to say, but it's still widely being used for crime because there are so many gullible people that are swimming in this space. So every year, billions and billions of dollars is being hacked and stolen via the blockchain. It's just now that the criminals are sometimes having a hard time getting it out.
It occurs to me that a lot of this coincided with the collapse of some of the more, extra legal networks on the internet at that time, like LimeWire or Napster or other. Those were there were interactions being had there with that material. Was that framework kind of a part of crypto's beginnings?
I think it's really notable to look at all of these sort of like the ones you mentioned, LimeWire and Napster, and crypto as sort of a piece, like a singular or like an ideological pool about peer-to-peer. The idea that, the government or the internet was supposed to be this amazing peer-to-peer network. It became more and more centralized. So you have these systems that are trying to break that cycle. And also, people with illegal motives swimming towards that as a way to make a quick buck.
And as you say the word centralized, then that gets to the central promise of cryptocurrency, which is that it would be decentralized. Can you explain what that means to people? Because it's clearly, I mean, we're dancing around it a little bit, but this has a libertarian bend to all of it, right? I mean, and even in the language that's discussed, it's anti-Federal Reserve. It's kind of like anti-state in terms of as it relates to what the function of the government is as it relates to currency. The liberals may have been taken in by it in the wake of the crash, but I feel like the picture of what crypto is quite fundamentally libertarian.
I think a lot of the most important early crypto thinkers were libertarian, and there was a lot of libertarians who flocked to crypto because it sort of matched exactly upon their beliefs. So I'm not going to deny that at all. I would say that, just to open up another perspective here, a lot of my book, I try to have it take place outside of the United States, because I think for most people in the US, they don't really understand crypto's use because it's not that useful. Like, we have payment rails that like basically work, like PayPal, and like Venmo is a peer-to-peer system where it's very easy to pay your friend or like a contractor with that. I think crypto's promise is potentially a little clearer in other places, either where that financial digital infrastructure hasn't come yet, or they're potentially oppressive governments that are trying to control money and how you can use it. So one of sort of the main locales in my book is Nigeria. In 2020, there are giant protests. It's called the End SARS movement in Nigeria, against this sort of special police force in Nigeria that was basically imprisoning and torturing civilians for no reason. And the only way that these protests could raise money against these injustices actually was through crypto at the time, because the government was working side by side with the national bank to basically shut down all donations to these protests. So this is, I mean, you can call it libertarian, but one of the sort of central points of the crypto community is like, say you have an oppressive government that's tracking how you want to spend your money, or, you know, if they don't like a certain cause, then you can use crypto to circumnavigate that. Again, it's put into practice, it's shaky because the government actually is proven quite adept in tracking crypto funds. But yes, this is the promise of crypto, that you can transact outside of governmental overwatch.
And that promise makes more sense in the circumstances that you describe, right? I mean, it's, I think, less relevant for usage for some guy in Florida than it is for somebody in a country where the currency is extremely volatile and where there's a lot of, I think, there's a massive vacuum as it relates to people trying to get ahead. And that's where it seems like Sam Bankman-Fried's vision of effective altruism comes in to a degree, where it's almost like working backwards from the fact that the demand and use case for cryptocurrency makes more sense in countries with very unstable currencies as opposed to in the United States or in the UK or something to that degree, to that effect. I'm reminded again as a leftist of shock doctrine politics by Naomi Klein, of when there are disasters or there's a vacuum, that capital can fill that in sometimes very exploitative ways. And I guess that's where we get to SBF here.
Yeah, I'll start with your sort of larger point and then I'll pivot to SBF. I think you're absolutely right. And this is something that I'm always thinking about, is like, yes, it's true that crypto potentially works better than like the systems in the countries with the worst regimes or with the most chaos. This is a point that's often brought up by crypto boosters. Like, yeah, when there's major instability, crypto provides that stability. But the idea that you are just like, you created a system that's maybe only slightly better than the worst case scenario doesn't say anything about how well it's going to work as a potential like global financial infrastructure. So yes, I think that's a great point. Moving on to Sam. Okay, so Sam Bankman-Fried is my age. He's 32 years old. He was anointed the richest 29-year-old in the world by Forbes just 3 years ago. He had a massive fortune of about $18 billion. He had created and this is on paper, yes. He created a $32 billion crypto empire of a few different things. He had an exchange, and then he had basically like a trading firm that was playing incredibly risky games with crypto, just packing risk upon risk upon risk. So Sam, a lot of people in crypto want to disown him because they say Sam isn't an ideological crypto guy. And actually, this is true. The folks that I talked to early in his life basically said that Sam was very skeptical of crypto and its usefulness for society early on. But he saw this immense opportunity of just making as much money as possible. So Sam was on Wall Street as many 20-somethings and ambitious 20-somethings in New York. He was trying to make as much money as he could because he believed in this thing called effective altruism, and a certain sect of it which believed that if you were good at math, you should just make the most amount of money possible and then give it away to vetted causes. So he thought about, going to a nonprofit or something, but he concluded, or he was basically advised by the effective altruist folks, like, no, you're really good at math, you're really good at trading. Just go to Jane Street and make a ton of money and then donate it all away. And so he did that for a while, but then he saw that in crypto, the amount of arbitrage you could do, was way more profitable in crypto than Wall Street because it's so volatile, right? So if you're a good trader and it's really volatile, you can find the cracks where there's a difference and you can just make a ton of money, basically. So he comes into crypto not caring about these decentralized ideals at all. And he basically is making money while he's centralizing crypto. So the whole point, one of the central points of crypto is that there's no middleman between you and your money, that, you know where your money is on the blockchain, you access it yourself, and then you trade it peer to peer. But Sam creates FTX, which is an exchange, which is basically just like, hey, you have some crypto, just you can park it here with us.
It's a middleman.
In the Bahamas. It's the most centralized middleman that you can get. And then but meanwhile, he's adopting all of crypto's talking points. And some of them are related to Africa and these, the third world rhetoric of we're going to bank the unbanked, and we're going to let all these people who had no access to the global financial ecosystem and let them in. And basically all he's doing is creating his own unregulated crypto bank that holds people's money. And then he's not telling them that he's taking their money and he's investing the depositors' money in the most risky crypto ventures imaginable. And it's going really well, and the pie is growing until it collapses, and then it all disappears.
And can you explain to folks how he took the money from the exchange and put it into another entity without really any oversight to make some of these risky trades?
So Sam is American, but he's not running FTX in America because the licenses that he would have to get in America, he did not like and care for. Instead, he decamps to the Bahamas, where there's a much looser regulatory regime. And he's basically running this pseudo non-regulated bank out of the Bahamas, where there's just he doesn't have a board of directors. He doesn't really have audits. He doesn't have any sort of checks and balances there. It's just him and his, friends managing billions and billions of dollars. So there are different sort of mechanisms that he uses. Some of it is just that it's all going into one bank account, for some people, when they deposit their money into FTX, thinking that it's kept in FTX. It's not. It's just going into Sam's big pool. There was no separation of church and state, and then he was just taking money out and he was putting it into, I mean, a lot of it is investments, but he's putting it into Bahamian real estate. He's putting it into U.S. presidential elections, and there's just no one checking him on this at all.
And you mentioned how he was donating to candidates. Can you speak about that strategy as well? Because he was publicly donating to Democrats and less publicly donating to Republicans.
Yes. And this relates to actually what's going on right now in terms of crypto and the elections that we can get to. But yeah, so Sam basically puts himself forward. Okay, so Sam was amazing at crafting his public image. He had this giant unruly mane of hair. He only wore basically like shorts and a bad t-shirt. There's this famous image of him on stage with Tony Blair and Bill Clinton at a his own crypto conference. And Clinton and Blair are wearing suits, and he's just at the beach. He's wearing a t-shirt and shorts. And he's doing this because it puts him in this lineage of Silicon Valley geniuses who like are terrible dressers, but maybe if they're like putting less time into their outfit, then they're putting all of their brain energy into, the really important things, which is to make as much money as possible or whatever. And so one of the other optics he realizes helpful is to donate to Democrats. He openly tells a reporter after it all comes down that, if you donate to Democrats, then, the left wing, the liberal media is going to be more favorable to you. And if you donate to Republicans, they'll all freak out. So he enters in 2020. He's the third biggest donor to Biden's campaign behind like Soros and Bloomberg. And he's sort of making his mark that he's going to be sort of a centrist left, sensible, pro-tech Democrat in the way that, Obama had cozied up to the Silicon Valley industry just, a generation before. And he's giving all these interviews about how, like the alliance between tech and Democrats and crypto and Democrats, and they're notable Democrats who get on board with his vision. But this posture is false because he's set up this sort of elaborate donation scheme that involves his brother, actually, in which they're funneling money through different channels and different PACs and stuff to give to both to Democrats and Republicans. And basically, they're just trying to get pro-crypto regulation, and they're trying to attack weak spots and see, are there Democrats that might be more favorable? One of the Democrats, actually, he donates a bunch to is Maxwell Frost, a Gen Zer who might be more, susceptible is a, accusatory word, but, as a younger member of Congress who might be more amenable to, talk of, the idea of financial innovation. So yeah, he set up this whole rig where he's donating millions and millions both to Democrats and Republicans, just with the goal of getting more pro-crypto legislators and friendly legislators in the halls of Congress.
And this fight continues to this day on that front because crypto is trying to make a resurgence in this election cycle, and we'll get to that in just a second. But the parts that you wrote about, I mean, you profiled in your book a Nigerian artist, this other woman, Christine, from Taiwan, just some of the people who were at the front lines of this. Can you remind? Now that the crypto crash happened, right, and there were a lot of people heavily invested in this industry who maybe don't have, say, like Sam, professor parents or like a cushion. I mean, he's going to jail for quite a long time, but at least in theory, some of these people who were doing it for pure speculation as opposed to making their career on it. Why did you think it was important to highlight some of these people, and what does it say about the crypto industry broadly?
Yes. So I think it's important really to stress that crypto is not one type of person. There are all sorts of ideologies and weird types of subcurrents in crypto. And especially in 2021 and 2022, crypto was like the craziest Renaissance fair imaginable because there were artists and there were gamblers and there were venture capitalists and there were scientists and there were all these, just like people who really believed in this idea that blockchain was going to upend every portion of society. That we were going to put like medical records on the blockchain, and that blockchains were going to upend all sorts of organizations. And there's this guy named the blockchain socialist who I actually really like, who is like thinking about how to use the blockchain to build more co-op structures. So there's all these people that are coming in, and especially in 2021 during the pandemic. There's this big sort of, now we know it as a myth of NFTs as like this sort of new digital cultural force, that NFTs are going to be really good for art and artists around the world to be able to put their art in front of new collectors and sort of rewrite the rules of how artists and culture makers are going to rise. Another sort of popular idea during this time is the idea of like, what if you and a collective could create a new decentralized Disney, that you could create a new Mickey Mouse, and then instead of like Disney owning it, then you could create and own these new set of characters that are going to become the next Disney or the next Marvel. Right. So crypto, the idea of crypto, like infects the minds of so many people around the world who ostensibly have good intentions or just want to create good art, or a good TV show. And I follow some of these characters around the world who previously had no access either to the US financial system or the US cultural system, and wanted to weigh in, and became really successful because there was such a bubble. There was so much money sloshing around, and were able to share their ideas on a global stage. And then it collapsed. All the money evaporated, and now crypto has returned in price, but the idea of NFTs has really eroded, and there are very few people right now. Like when you turn on the TV and if there's anybody talking about crypto, it's like Andreessen Horowitz, or like hedge fund guys who are talking about crypto as an investment. They're really not talking about like helping the artists in Africa or the gamers in Indonesia or anything like that. So I think there was a lot of disillusionment that came out of crypto as a global social change maker, and now the arguments for it are sort of they're very big still, but they're much narrower.
And it's interesting that you bring up the hedge funds, because that seems to me, at least from the outside, behind a lot of the resurgence in 2024 of this kind of public lobbying to say, okay, Harris, you got to be more friendly to the crypto industry. There's also like this push that led, honestly, by the two senators in my state of New York, but Gillibrand in particular, on the Democratic side, to regulate crypto. And you mentioned that Bankman-Fried was pushing for regulations. Well, that would formalize crypto, right? And that's part of what they want. So how have they pivoted in their influence campaign in this election, and is regulation a part of that?
Yes, we're swimming in very muddy waters here, as you correctly note, because the crypto industry they want regulation. They want to prevent, or they're saying, we want to prevent the next SBF, but really they're trotting out basically all of the same sort of policy proposals that Sam himself advocated for, and a lot of the same tactics. They're not being shady about it in terms of targeting both, sides of the aisle. They're doing it out in the open. So Public Citizen last week released a report just 5 days ago that any, I think if you're a leftist, or really anybody in the country, I think should take a look at, because they basically found that crypto is outspending big oil. They're outspending the Coke industries. They're outspending the banks right now. Half of the corporate money into this election is coming from crypto this year. That's, over $150 million flowing in, mostly from 4 companies. So that's Andreessen Horowitz, Coinbase, Ripple. These are crypto companies, and they're loud. They're flooding money into congressional races. Their lobbying presence on the Hill is oversized, and they are talking a big game about basically trying to, get regulation for crypto. And as you said, they do want regulation, but they want crypto normalized. They want it part of the American financial institutions. And so, we're seeing Trump on one side, Trump wholeheartedly endorsing crypto, saying, we want U.S. to stockpile a giant reserve of it. We're seeing Cynthia Loomis in Wyoming saying,
well, how can you trust the U.S. Treasury to hold all this crypto? What? Go on, sorry.
Yes. So because I would say, there's a lot of Republicans now who it's just like very easy for them to be pro crypto because it's like pro finance, pro industry, like less regulation. But a lot of money is flowing into the Democrat side too, because there are people like Gillibrand and others who are like, we want crypto regulation. Like we don't want people to be scammed. So we want crypto regulation as well. And then once you get in the details, it's really hard to square where is like pro industry and what's pro. So yeah, there are a handful of Democrats who are, warming to this idea. There was a Harris aide who gave a quote last week that, Kamala wants to, help the industry thrive. But Kamala hasn't said anything herself, so it's unclear, what she would actually do. But yeah, I think the most important thing is how much money is coming in from crypto corporations on a scale that's kind of unprecedented to these elections. And, in such a contested year, they are making in terms of their money, they're going to make a difference in the Senate and the House.
And how much of it is also, as you said, like the hedge funds having a lot of crypto, or, other big financial institutions getting in on this fad when it was exploding? Jamie Dimon, I think, came out publicly and said, I wouldn't be involved in that. And so it's not all the banks, right? But it seems to me like the persistence of their lobbying efforts has to do with the fact that these financial institutions made bets that immediately fell apart on crypto when that crash happened, and they still have these holdings that they're holding on to that they want to see get back to where they once were.
Andreessen Horowitz has long been one of crypto's biggest backers and did put in obscene amount of money into the crypto industry during the last cycle. Obviously now they're very invested in AI, but so it goes back to this idea that, it's Andreessen Horowitz, they just want more money, less taxes for themselves. And they want to see these twin tech industries grow really fast. In terms of the banks, so there's a type of financial, I guess, product called a Bitcoin ETF that the Biden's SEC, they tried to tamp down. They were overturned. So these ETFs hit the market this year. It basically lets your average person, buy a financial, like it's a tool that basically lets you buy into Bitcoin without actually having to own it. So this becomes more attractive to just like the idea of some sort of investor who, wants some exposure to Bitcoin because, it's highly volatile. It could go up, it could go down. But if you bought Bitcoin in 2020 and are still holding it now, it did, multiply by 8 or 9 times. So all of these people who are used to risk, just like saying, all right, we know that Bitcoin's risky. We know it could go to zero, but we're going to put a little bit of our portfolio in because of diversifying. And so that is helping sort of grow the pie of Bitcoin, even if Bitcoin is no more useful in terms of any practical applications than it was 4 years ago. There's just all these money managers, like institutionalized money managers now, who are like, well, what the hell? We can afford this risk.
Really, really appreciate your time today. Andrew R. Chow, Time Magazine technology correspondent, author of Cryptomania, Hype, Hope, and the Fall of FTX's billion-dollar fintech empire. We will put a link to your book in the description wherever people are listening to or watching this. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
All right, folks. We'll wrap in a sec. I just wanted to get this story in before we head into the fun half because it's important. Yesterday, Elizabeth Warren went on, I guess this is a Meet the Press, yes, with Welker, and she was asked specifically about Kamala Harris's very ambiguous stance as it relates to Israel and arming them at this moment, right? She's basically repeated the Biden administration's line on this front and said, I support Palestinian self-determination, but Israel has a right to defend itself, which implies that Israel is defending itself right now, which we know is not the case.
Wiping Gaza off the map.
Right. Now, Phil Gordon, who is an Obama administration alumni, was an Iran deal person, so better than the West exec crew, is her advisor, national security advisor for the vice president, a bit distinct from Biden's team, had put out a statement that said something about, we'll always allow Israel to defend itself from Iran, which felt very pointed and not related to Gaza. And Harris has been leaking things to the press since the beginning of the year before she was even the candidate, basically saying, I'm more sympathetic, trust me, trying to distance herself for her own political career from this policy. But the problem is that what we've been saying for weeks here, this issue is something that she's going to have to differentiate herself on, if that really is the case, if that's really her position. My hunch has been she's not an old racist like Biden and is going to pursue a policy, in my view, that's more in her own self-interest. And continuing down this road is not in her self-interest if she wants to, say, run for re-election in 2028. But again, you can't just, those are very
you have to say no to Israel.
Yeah. She's gonna, for her, if she wants to really maximize her chances to win this election too, this is an issue that matters to Democratic voters. I mean, half of Democrats feel it's a genocide, and it also matters in really important states. Do you want to take that risk in Michigan? Do you want to take that risk in Pennsylvania? So I think it would be prudent politically, even if she's afraid to say, like, criticize the sitting administration, at a certain point, Biden, he's a lame duck. So we don't need to show him the fealty that he isn't, frankly, showing to her.
He's also unpopular. People hate him.
I know. And it's not like he's making the situation easy for her, right? So it might be time to kind of throw the old man overboard to a degree. But Elizabeth Warren, again, went on with Kristen Welker, and this is what she said is her advice to Harris on how she could differentiate herself from Biden.
That Vice President Harris should be conditioning military aid to Israel. Will you counsel her to do that?
Look, I want to be clear. American law already says that we give military aid only to those who are in compliance with international law. What Benjamin Netanyahu has done in creating a humanitarian disaster in Gaza raises questions about compliance with international law. The United States needs to live its values every day.
Senator Elizabeth Warren, I have more questions.
That was all she said there, right? But this is her going out there on the Sunday shows, which is when people make their case for the week, politicians, her trying to say, here's a path forward. You can say, as the prosecutor candidate, I'm going to enforce the law. Now, here I'll give you what people are telling Harris right now. They're saying to her, first of all, you're riding a lot of momentum. We don't want AIPAC money pouring into this race. We're staving them off right now by being ambiguous. We saw what they did in primary campaigns. What can they do to us in the general? Now, what they're also saying to her is that if you're going to come out and say that I will enforce the Leahy law, which is really plural. It's basically two statutory provisions, one for the State Department, one for the Department of Defense. The Leahy law, if it's triggered, basically bars the United States, as Warren alluded to, from giving military assistance to foreign military units that are violating human rights. And quite clearly, Israel is systemically raping prisoners amongst just slaughtering children in Gaza, blocking U.S. humanitarian aid from coming through as well, to alleviate the starvation and immiseration of Palestinians. So like there are countless examples that you could come up with, but the problem here is that the Biden administration has concluded that Israel is not in violation of that under their State Department review. So what she would be doing is accusing the Biden administration of breaking the law, basically implicitly by saying, I would enforce the law and Biden is not. And my point is that she'll have to do that at some point, because this hysterical policy by the Biden administration is going to go down in flames. We are sending massive ships with, I think, nuclear capabilities and our fleet to the Mediterranean right now as a way to show force to Iran. And the Biden crew has made it clear that they will not break with Israel for any real reason. So at a certain point, what is her political disincentive to distance herself from Biden? Especially when they're already trying to provoke the regional war that is supposedly the sword of Damocles hanging over their head. And I would just point out, this is belated. It's nice for Warren to say this now. It could have happened much earlier, but also Leahy himself, Senator Leahy, said in 2016 that the Obama administration should look into Israel and Egypt for human rights violations. We've been lying about this, and it goes a lot deeper than Biden, and it needs to stop, because this is what it is. This is the fruit that we got, which is, they say about 40,000 or whatever. I mean, we know that the actual toll here is approaching a Holocaust when you talk about the people and the amount of that's even Gaza that's left. They're flattening it and turning it all into rubble. They want to remove it from the map, and they might be successful in this unless this stops now. Yeah. And so I think Warren is being shrewd there in just giving her an out or giving her an option as to how she can address this. Follow the law. She seems to have taken Warren's advice before. They have a relationship that goes back to when Harris was an attorney general in California, and Katie Porter was the monitor that, and Porter is Warren's protege, was the monitor that Harris selected to oversee the settlement with the banks in the wake of the financial collapse. So I think that they actually do have a relationship, and this is Warren going out there trying to say, here's a way that you can distance yourself. I hope Harris listens, and I hope she heeds this call, because it's an easy case to make if you make it in this way. You just have to be okay with, and I have my fears that the people that are still staffing this campaign, they're just Biden people. She took over the Biden campaign, that there's a lot of probably institutional pressure for her not to do so. There won't be any courage on this unless they need it to win. And I was just reading my Hubert Humphrey stuff. Hubert Humphrey's 1948 gambit on let's get out of states' rights and move towards human rights in 1948 is what helped swing the election to Truman. But that's because Truman was getting his ass kicked. If Kamala is up everywhere,
particularly in places like Michigan, they will not do anything. They will not change policy. If this gets closer and tight, and they all of a sudden need to activate that base, I think that it's there for them, and they could possibly do it. I think the people in power right now would prefer to not activate people who really give a damn, and they'd rather coast to power on people who are willing to, hold their nose, which is a lot of people, because unfortunately Republicans represent a really, really retrograde turn in themselves, obviously more so in a lot of things. So like that's the bet I think that they're going to make, and it's effing depressing.
Well, yeah, I mean, this is why this is so, I think, agonizing in that way, is because right now their number one imperative is to win. That's the reality of the situation. They feel they have a limited time period to define her as a candidate in the public's eye. They felt like they used the 5 or 6 weeks before the convention after Biden dropped out to shore up the base through Walz coming out there, introducing policy proposals, getting that excitement going. And then her convention speech was a very I'm tough on crime and border centrist appeal to expand the electorate to people who might be squishy about a woman president and the perception of her as being too liberal. And so cold-hearted political calculation, I understand exactly what they're doing, and it's hard to disagree with the strategy. I mean, you see it in the polls, but
I mean, they would win bigger if they did it, but they'd rather squeak it out.
They are doing a do no harm strategy, and there is still, again, that tension of this still being Biden's party. He's still the incumbent, but if I were her, I would say I would be asking my advisors every day, how can I distance myself from him in a way, or get this out there to people? Because I don't think that she is the same guy as the guy that wanted, once floated a constitutional amendment to ban integration via busing for schools, or the guy that once shocked Menachem Begin about how racist he was about Palestinians. Now, we'll see. But right now, unfortunately, a lot of these calls are currently incompatible with her desire to win.
There's a lot of people who want to bring up Fannie Lou Hamer with regards to Kamala Harris, and I'm sorry, it is offensively complacent to put Harris in the role. Harris is the one standing and saying no to those people right now. And whether she's doing it for her own pragmatic reasons or not, that's the place that she's going to go down in history. And so if she wants this moment to be one of joy and one of this great first, you better not have something like this hanging over it. Would be, just in terms of me, that's what I'd want, but whatever.
Well, no, I agree with you.
I know you do. I'm just talking to any staffers that might want to say why are you guys raining on our parade? Well, that's why.
The genocide is why we're raining on the parade.
And I think it would be, I see, Emma, I think your strategy there, what you're laying out is right. But I think the tough thing for Harris that obviously has befallen the entire Biden-Harris administration and campaign since October 7th is the idea of, if we're going to make this a sort of law and order pitch, we also then ultimately have to acknowledge actually that international law is enforceable and is law. Right. As you're saying, is actually bound by restrictions and regulations and must be enforced and make it so that it is actionable, as opposed to something that is every so often utilized in rhetoric when it comes to places like Ukraine or other places in the world that they're willing to deploy it for
against U.S. Enemies or for U.S. interests, right? So I think our hopes should be, as we're saying, very tempered on this, but at least here Warren is giving her a pathway forward, and I would like to see her take it. We'll check that out in the coming days, and obviously keep monitoring that. With that said, we are going to wrap up the free part of this program, head into the fun half, where we'll take your calls and read your IMs. The number is 646-257-3920. We'll open up the phone lines in just a bit. But Matt, what's happening on Left Reckoning?
Left Reckoning. David Griscom and I talked about socialist Hal Draper's essay on lesser evilism versus the Tweedledum Tweedledee thing, which he argues that both sort of understandings, whether there's no difference between the presidents or there's a lesser evil thing, kind of it's the question that's the problem, and points to a crisis, and which is kind of what I've been saying the entire time I've been doing this damn job. So it's nice to see a guy in 1967 looking ahead to the Nixon LBJ at that point race, and saying like, yeah, actually, there's enough for everybody to. It'd be nice if we could just inject that into a lot of people's heads that want to make it about, the only point of leverage is on the election day, which is like, there's a lot of points of leverage clearly ahead of them, and anyway, so I'm rambling a little bit, but patreon.com/Left Reckoning to get access to that.
On ESPN today, we will give a fantasy football preview. I'll talk about my favorite picks for each round, who I like, who I don't like, what my tips are for people who are drafting, tiebreaker rules, basically preview. It's like if you're a good offense, that's usually what you should bet on for the most part. And I also have some thoughts more about the Tua and Brian Flores situation. I think that this, do you think it's a coincidence, Bradley, that Tua came out and called Brian Flores, who is suing the owner that just gave Tua $212 million, suing him for racial discrimination, that he came out and called him a terrible person on the podcast last week? Do you think that that's a coincidence? I don't know.
Anyway.
I didn't like the vibe from that.
You should check out Raja Bell had a good discussion of that on the Ringer NBA podcast, where he's, as a player, because he sees it from both sides. Like, he had coaches that sort of got into his head and sort of psyched him out a little bit, but also he's like, at a certain point, you're a professional athlete, get your shit together.
And this is not the first time that Tua has, the guy can't throw when December comes around. I wouldn't say he's the toughest guy of all time. So perhaps I'm a little old school in that way, but it's football, folks. It's not patty cakes, okay? It's
not friends ball. Okay?
Yeah.
Bear Bryant over here.
Yeah, I mean, Tua wants to go play pickleball. It's wide open for him. 64625.
Oh, sorry. Before we go, can I just plug something really quick on behalf of Sam? Sam just wanted to to plug this friend of the show and someone who has appeared both over the phone and on our show a few times, Mohammed Al-Dagma, and his family in Gaza are still have this GoFundMe going to now try and assist as many displaced families as they can with a Gaza bakery, is what they're calling it, to feed displaced families in where they're at.
This is a new fundraiser, right? Because they reached their goal, and we played that many of this is some let's get to that video, or this is the breakdown of what this GoFundMe does in Gaza. The plan is to provide 30,000 meals to displaced Palestinians from Gaza. We ended up, it worked. We got some of the fundraiser that we were so happy to share. And many of the members of the family, including the young girl who has Down syndrome, were able to make it over the Egyptian border because it's basically like a bribery scheme to get out. But some of the men stayed behind and other family members to distribute food. I know one of them was killed by Israel. But the fact that they're still staying there to feed people, I mean, just speaks to just the bravery of people in the face of this genocide. So if you have any extra money that you'd like to donate, this money goes to distributing food for people in Gaza. And
as Sam always says with this stuff, Sam just through his connections with Muhammad knows where this is going and knows where these resources are being allocated towards. It's obviously, when you're in a moment like this, it feels as if you can't really help anybody when you're not able to help everybody in the situation. But I think if you have even any cent, any dollar will go a long way to helping this effort that we know is real and legit going to families in Gaza that are being displaced, and hopefully setting up even a more robust kitchen and facility for them to continue to do this. So I'll put the GoFundMe link in our for the rest of the week in our show notes and YouTube description. And I believe Sam said that he will have some more video from some of the distribution sites and some of the distribution and some video of Muhammad's family as well. So we will play that once we have more of that as well. So
do we have that video of the little food distribution that
for some reason it's not coming up on our Slack on this computer. It's only coming up on mine, but I will download them for tomorrow.
Okay.
So we can play them. And also I believe Sam is going to be sending some more updated video within today or tomorrow as well that we'll have to play as well.
All right, sounds good. See you in the fun half.
Okay, Emma, please.
Well, I feel that my voice is sorely lacking on the majority report.
Wait, whoa. Look, Sam is unpopular.
I do deserve a vacation at Disney World. So, ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to welcome Emma to the show.
It is Thursday.
Yeah, I think you need to take over for Sam.
Yes, please.
No. I'm gonna pause you right there.
Wait, what?
You can't encourage Emma to live like this. And I'll tell you why. So was offered a tour, sushi, and poker with the boys. Tour, sushi, and poker with the boys. So was offered a tour, sushi, and poker with the boys.
What?
Tour, sushi, and poker.
Tim's upset?
Tour, sushi, and poker with the boys. So was offered a tour, sushi, and
that's what we call it in the biz.
Tour, sushi, and poker with the boys.
Right.
Tour, sushi, and poker.
We're gonna get demonetized.
I just think that what you did to Tim Pool was mean.
Free speech.
That's not what we're about here. Look at how sad he's become now. We shouldn't even talk about it because I think you're responsible.
I probably am in a certain way, but let's get to the meltdown here.
Tour, sushi, and poker with the boys.
Oh my God.
Tour,
wow.
Sushi.
I'm sorry, I'm losing my fucking mind.
So was offered a tour, sushi, and poker with the boys.
Logic.
Tour, sushi, and poker with the boys. Boy. Tour.
I think I'm like a little kid. I think I'm like a little kid. I think I'm like a kid.
Tour.
I think I'm like a little kid. I think I'm like a little kid.
I had this debate 7,000 times.
A little kid. I think I'm like a little kid. I think I'm like a kid.
Tour.
I'm losing my fucking mind.
Some people just don't understand.
So I'm not trying to be a dick right now, but like,
I absolutely think the U.S. should be providing me with a wife and kids.
That's not what we're talking about here. Okay, all right.
It's not a fun job. Tour? That's a real thing. That's real thing. Real thing. Willy Wonka tour? That's a real thing. That's real thing. Real thing. What's that offered a tour? That's a real thing. That's real thing. Real thing. That's a tour? A real thing. That's real thing. Real thing. What's that offered a tour?
Ladies and gentlemen, Joe Rogan has done it again.
That offered a tour? That's a real thing. That's poker with the boys.
I think he might be blowing it out of proportion.
Real thing. That's poker with the boys. That offered a tour? That's a real thing. That's poker.
Let's go, Joey.
Tour? Sushi and poker with the boys.
Take it easy, Glenn.
Tour, sushi, and poker.
Things have really gotten out of hand.
Sushi and poker with the boys.
Delusional.
Tour,
deluded.
Sushi.
You don't have a clue as to what's going on. Live YouTube.
Sam has like the weight of the world on his shoulders. Sam doesn't want to do this show anymore. It was so much easier when the majority report was just you. You were happy.
Let's change the subject.
Right.
Rangers and Knicks, right?
Now shut up. You don't want people saying reckless things on your program.
That's one of the most difficult parts about this show.
This is a pro-killing podcast.
I'm thinking maybe it's time we bury the hatchet.
Left is best. Violet.
Tour.
Don't be foolish and don't fucking tweet at me and don't bitch. The way Emma has cucked all of these people, love it.
That's where my heart is, so I wrote my honors thesis about it.
Oh,
sorry.
She wrote an honest thesis. I guess I should hand the main mic to you now.
You are to the right of me on foreign policy.
We already fund Israel, dude. Are you against that?
That's a tougher question I have an answer to.
Incredible theme song.
Hi, Bumbler.
Emma Vigeland, absolutely one of my favorite people. Actually, not just in the game, like period.
We are back, folks. It is the fun half of the majority report. We will open up the phone lines here. 646-257-3920. Kowalski from Nebraska. Wow, you guys are bringing on somebody to bash cryptocurrency and talking about how it's wrong that we're using American weapons and prestige to help a settler colonial regime murder innocent Palestinian children. Are we trying to anger the David Pakman community? If so, I'm all for it and we'll be your number one soldier. We need more blood sports. I'm particularly agitated as the AC is not working in my tractor and it's 98 degrees out. Oh my gosh. Kowalski, I hope you have some ice water with you. Cole from Missouri, taking the coach's side just because you don't like the player is wild. Oh, is your boss too hard on you, or are you just weak mentally? Well, if I was in football, if I was playing football, I think maybe I'd have a little bit of a different perspective. He doesn't. Flores admitted maybe he was a little too tough on him, but going publicly and bashing the guy who is suing the person who's just signed you to an over $200 million deal that you didn't deserve. Right after that, and calling him a terrible person as he's like the first black coach to take that step.
Bosses aren't, or coaches aren't bosses, they're management.
Yeah.
But
seems a little coincidental to me.
But yeah, also again, like the Raja Bell take was from an actual professional athlete. I think there's a balance clearly. Like our like Zion Williamson's coaches. It'd be nice if they had more of an influence over him over the past few years for his own good. I've seen that now he's slimmed down again.
Tua also has a weight problem. That's the other, and he admitted I didn't work that hard.
Exactly.
And then now retroactively the dude's a terrible person.
And you hear all the you hear lots of players now because they all have podcasts, and they often say like, I wish I learned these skills and this discipline earlier in my career. Like it is a balance. It's not. And putting it in if you're going to apply a sort of Marxist lens to sports, it is down with the owners.
Yep.
And guess what? They wouldn't all just do player coaches then either. They would still probably have a coaching staff.
And Tua's doing the work for the owner that signs his checks right now. That's my point, right? And it's not it's a different power dynamic. Like the player oftentimes has more power than the coach. And that was the case in this instance too, because he was the 5th overall pick and he won the national championship at Alabama. And so, yeah. It's a more complicated than that, but we'll get into that on ESPN. I do have a personal axe to grind with that player, but it's more just I have it out for people who air their dirty laundry in that way in sports. Iowa Ryan, Elizabeth Warren didn't even have the decency to drop out when Bernie was running. Even RFK did that for Trump. Well, I don't know. I mean, RFK was also trying to get something out of it, as was Warren. Warren wanted to be VP, and you can argue, in the end, she did wield some influence on things like Lena Khan. But yeah, that campaign sucked as it related to Bernie.
Don't revisit the primary if you want to feel good about
yeah.
Well, I mean, speaking about bad coaches, and I won't draw the direct line, but George Karl, a lot of NBA players hate him, and the funny thing that they do is post snake emojis on Twitter.
Oh, well, there you go.
When the grass is cut, the snakes will show, according to, I think J.R. Reid said that.
J.R.
Smith, sorry, not J.R. Reid.
J.R., okay. Trans Stuck in the NFL said, Dave Rubin and Sam taking a vacation at the same time can't be a coincidence. Sounds like an ideal romantic getaway. How dare you?
Imagine Dave Rubin finding out that Sam is at the same resort.
He would move. He would leave.
He's trying to unplug and then Sam's there.
It's his worst nightmare. Minadishu, Teddy Roosevelt used to do taxidermy. When he was a kid, he measured a dead seal on the New York docks every day. He had his own natural history museum. TR would have carried that whale head. Yes. I mean, I don't know if we can draw a modern equivalent to that, though.
Except they're both eccentric people who, do outdoor stuff.
JC and As, I know the majority of Dems want a ceasefire, but do most Dems want Harris to promise to do more than she is, or are Democrats largely happy with what she said at the DNC? The polls I've seen don't go into that detail. Yeah, that's a big question I have. I think a lot of Democrats, for the most part, are okay with just ceasefire language.
Because AOC helped to create manufacture consent for this, because a lot of people think they are trying their best and it's a really complicated subject, and actually those people are just spoil sports. It's a pretty big problem.
Let's speaking of AOC, she was on with New York City Council member. Is it Shai Ose? OC? I'm not exactly sure how to say his name. I'm so sorry. We'll look it up. But he's been doing these interviews that are really good. He